Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring. And I've got a very special guest with me this week. He is a professional wrestler, promoter, manager, booker. He's got his own social media marketing company called Overdriver, and we're going to talk more about that. He's worked with several people in the wrestling business, including Cash Wheeler, Jerry Lynn, Shane Douglas, and WWE Hall of Famers, the Rock and Roll Express, the one and only Mr. Bill Wright. Welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
I appreciate that, Stanley. That's a fantastic introduction.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. I appreciate that. You do this for a living. It shows.
Thank you. Trying to get it right every time I do this. But yeah, let's talk about your upbringing and childhood. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, back in 1983, and my childhood is I don't know. I don't know if it's really anything particularly special, but I do remember that my grandfather on my mother's side had actually built that house for my grandmother. And when my mom and dad got married, they were very young, and she ended up moving down into the basement, which was a fully furnished apartment, and let them live upstairs. And of course, let us live upstairs, because then they had me and they had my brother. So I would sneak downstairs when I was very, very young and watch professional wrestling with my grandmother, watch Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake Roberts and all that, you know, of course, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, all those guys in the golden era of WWE.
Yeah, I mean, Worcester, that's a pretty sizable town. I mean, I've been there recently, New England, lots to do. It's so awesome, though, getting the chance to spend time with your family, making that a ritual, watching the WWE professional wrestling at such a young age. What really got you hooked? Like, gee, this is what I want to do. I want to get involved with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it has to do with influence. You know, I think, you know, when you're really young and you're impressionable, and you know, my grandmother was a big part of you know, that part of my life until I was about 5 or 6, and then she passed away. But you know, she loved it, so I loved it. You know, so and I think on the other aspect of it, I think that there's just a lot about professional wrestling that appeals to a lot of people, you know, and I know it's not for everybody, but you know, real life superheroes, you know, the colors and the moves and the action and whatnot. So I mean, I fell in love with wrestling pretty immediately, and then she had passed away, as I mentioned, and I appreciate the condolences. And my mother thought wrestling was too violent. So she actually, when my grandmother had passed away, she said, well, that's enough of the wrestling because you're too young and it's too violent. So I had to break away for a little while until we moved to North Carolina. And a cousin of mine was into it, and we were a little bit older. And she's like, okay, well, go ahead and watch it with him. And so I got right back into it. And that was right around the time that Hulk Hogan had just recently turned heel. And I had grown up the entire time he was a good guy. Now all of a sudden he's a bad guy. And so right back into being hooked, and I've been hooked ever since.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said earlier, pro wrestling definitely has something for everybody, something for all ages. And it's kind of interesting that a lot of fans that stopped watching, you know, in the 80s or took a break from it in the early 90s with the new generation stuff, got back into it once the product started becoming edgier, because you had the Attitude Era, you had WCW, you had the Monday Night Wars, with both companies going head to head. I mean, that had to have been such an amazing time period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it inspired, you know, generations upon generations, you know, with the storytelling that was done with the NWO, with Sting, with Raven's Flock, with Goldberg, and then on the opposite end you had the corporate ministry, and you know, you had D-Generation X, and there was just, you know, the Nation of Domination, and there was a lot for everybody. I think professional wrestling is, I think of it a lot like ice cream. I think there's just a ton of different flavors, you know, and everybody loves ice cream. It's just a matter of finding the flavor for you.
Yeah, I love that kind of comparison because now, after about, 20 or so years, you finally have alternatives. Like WWE for like 20 or so years was the big game in town, after WCW got bought out in ECW, but you got AEW, you got Impact still around, you got New Japan, you've got all these different companies, the indies, NWA, just a wide array of different companies. I think it's just amazing to see how much it's grown since that time period. And I think it's good to have competition around.
Oh, absolutely. Every business thrives from having competition. I think you're right in saying, Stanley, that professional wrestling is maybe even bigger than it's ever been. I mean, look at the fact that we can now say that the second biggest wrestling company in the world packed 81,000 people in London. That's the second biggest company in the world, not the first biggest. The first biggest just sold out 90 some odd thousand tickets
Yep.
for WrestleMania. Like that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have AML is growing, MLW is growing, and NWA has had their resurgence. Great things are happening all over the United States. That's part of what is so exciting about Overdriver and what we're doing in trying to unite professional wrestling, because the way we see it is it's not really so much that you're competing with each other. We're competing with the rest of the world. We're competing with football and basketball and television, whatnot. And now you have this writer strike going on. Well, guess what? You don't need a big writing staff for professional wrestling, and you can do adult shows, faith-based shows, charity shows, family shows, lucha libre only. You can do superhero wrestling. You name it, we can make it fit.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But I want to get more back into like when you wanted to break in the business as a wrestler. Who are like some of the people that you idolized, looked up to? And let's talk about the training process, how you kind of started.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I started a little bit late. I was about 25 years old, and I was riddled with anxiety. I actually uh, struggled with driving because I had so much anxiety at the time, and I had a stomach issue that had caused me to lose a significant amount of weight, about 80 pounds. And I went to see a doctor to figure out what was going on, and he put me on some antidepressants, which kind of changed things up. Now I'm blessed to say that I'm off of them, but for that period of time, it was necessary for me to A, put weight back on, and B, to get over a lot of those anxieties. So I started driving, and I started believing in myself and working out. And then I started watching, wrestling while I worked out. And I thought, well, I'm in good enough shape. I could try this. And so I did, and I reached out. I found it a little difficult to find a wrestling school that I felt was reasonable within my area, a reasonable drive, because at the time, I had a house, I had bills, that I had to pay. I had roots that I had to take care of. So as much as it would be great to quit and go up to Louisville, Kentucky, and worked for OVW, that wasn't in the cards for me at the moment. So I had to find something close, and it was a little difficult at that time back in 2008 to find a wrestling school in that area, but I did, and that's where I met my longtime best friend Crucifix, and he trained me up, and then he brought me into the business, and I started as a manager for only a couple of weeks before they put me in the ring, and then they could see what I was capable of doing, because I had studied it my whole life. So the technical side of it, I needed to learn a lot of the fundamentals to understand the business, and it took a while to really understand the proper psychology of it, but the execution of the moves, because I watched guys like Bret Hart, and I studied how he would execute his punches and his elbows, his leg drops and his submissions. A lot of what I did was very crisp, because I emulated guys like Chris Benoit, Bret Hart, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero. Those were the guys that I emulated my form after. And that made me a very sound technical wrestler, a suplex and a submission artist. And that's kind of where I started, and I just kept training from there.
Yeah, I love that style, not only because of what you just described, but they really, for a time, they emphasized a lot of that in the product
Mm-hmm.
with when it came to like, shoot matches or submission style matches. Guys like, Benoit and Brett and Guerrero. Also guys like Kurt Angle as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
just they put on a clinic, every night when they were going out and doing it. So those are some awesome, amazing talents that you're able to get influenced by. And you started training, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. You had some bumps, no pun intended, that you had to go through and, get
Concussions, yeah,
around. Yeah,
primarily,
get
yeah.
around. What advice were you given, like starting out, that kind of stuck with you throughout your training?
Yeah, so Ricky Morton actually asked what I found out later is a very common question, and he asked like how many matches you've had, and if you answered like, well, I've had like 62 matches or whatever, he'd say it's not enough. You've got to keep learning, you got to keep out there, and you got to keep getting experience. Like there's not a point where you should ever feel like you're done learning. And that was great advice, and something I took advice from. Crucifix taught me to take care of myself, because as much as people like to poke at wrestling and go, oh, it's fake, you got a lot of legit badasses that step in the ring. And egos are egos, and people go to business for themselves, and you have to be able to handle yourself in that scenario, not to mention the X factor, which is the audience. In my wrestling career, twice, two separate little old ladies would in two separate towns, two separate occasions, like completely separate incidents, but still a little old lady in two cases, and they hit me over the guardrail in the back while I'm doing my thing, while I'm wrestling, just like over the guardrail. Security didn't catch it, and I just get slammed from behind with and just a little old lady. I shake it off, but I mean, had that been like a 6-foot dude with a knife, trouble, right? So you have to be aware, and you have to take care of yourself. And believe it or not, I'm a strong man of faith. I love my faith. I study theology, and I went to a Christian wrestling show expecting that to be kind of a mellow wrestling show, and I was the heel in the main event, and I did my job well enough. Although I was respectful, never cussing, never flipping people off or anything like that. I respected where I was at, and still, that's the one show I was escorted out of the building early because somebody threatened to attack me with a knife.
Wow.
You have to be able to protect yourself, and that was also really, really sound advice. And Crucifix always took care of me on guiding me on those kind of fronts. Not letting people run roughshod over you, going to business for themselves, not let you get what you need to get in to make it make sense, and to learn different styles. And I think that's really important. I think it's great for you to study a spot monkey style and have 5 pages worth of spots, and sit down and write it out like Jerry Lynn or Macho Man Randy Savage. And I think it's also good to be able to go out there and call nothing and just feel the audience, and use that organic response in order to drive the dialogue.
Well, I think that's good to have somebody like a Crucifix to help protect you, make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and not letting all the rest of the people, the outsiders, just messing up those plans. Being able to go out and do that. So props, for you to still be able to do that.
Even though McMahon notoriously back in 2000 kind of let the cat out of the bag, and assassinated, publicly kayfabe around the world, and let people know this is an entertainment sport, whatever. Like it makes no difference to some people. Like they buy in regardless, and they buy in wholeheartedly. One of my good friends from the foundation, his wife hated me until I met her backstage and got to talk to her, because she totally bought into the character, and she was a worker's wife. So
What can you tell me about like any matches that you were in? Specifically, were you involved with any title matches or win any
sure.
championships? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I held multiple championships. I want to say about 7 championships throughout about 5 different companies. I've held tag team titles on 3 separate occasions. I was a champion called an all-star champion for a company called ACW, and I was able to defend that title against Manny Fernandez, who's known from the NWA, and CW Anderson in a hardcore match. Not that it was planned to be a hardcore match. I feel my heart goes out to ECW originals, because I feel like more often than not, they end up in a place where they get booked on the show, and without consulting ahead of time, the promoter just can't help themselves. And this has happened twice to me while I was working CW Anderson, where we planned on going in and just having a technical match, and the promoter comes in and is like, "Hey, man, C-Dub, would you mind if we made it like an Extreme Rules match?" And he was extremely accommodating, and that's absolutely what we did. So we did that, and I just feel like every time an ECW guy wrestles, they get asked that question. Hey, like, I know I brought you in for a tag team match, but can we do barbed wire? Like, just go easy on the guys.
You kind of have to. You kind of have to do justice with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrestled CW in the hardcore match, and then a couple of years later, I was on a winning streak of my own manufacturing, because I became very convinced that a lot of the local promoters were not really concerned with protecting the brand of the individual professional wrestler, and they were just very in some cases, I feel like some of the promoters were marks with money. They didn't have a lot of experience in storytelling. They didn't have a lot of experience in promoting. They didn't have a lot of experience in building brands and protecting brands. They were just kind of doing their thing on a whim because it was fun. And if you didn't look out for yourself and your own career, you were going to get buried on a whim. Not because it made sense, not because it made money, but just because they felt like this at the time. So I manufactured a winning streak in a very heelish fashion, and I was not just winning, but I was ticking up the numbers. If I was in a battle royal, I would count extra wins. If I was in a triple threat, I'd count it as 2 victories. It was all nonsense, and CW Anderson put an end to that winning streak in our second match. So we got a rubber match somewhere down the line, I would imagine. But so I got to work him. I got to work, as we mentioned, Cash Wheeler. I got to work him in a match, and got leveled well with a pile driver in that match. And I got to do a 6-man tag team match with the Rock and Roll Express. I was on the opposite side, and Chris Hicks was tagging with them, and me and Abel Adams and our partner, we ended up in a 6-man there. So and then there was a company called STW where we did a co-championship. We had a group called DOX, which consisted of 5 guys, and we all shared the world title and would take turns on who's defending it. So a lot of different stories we can go into.
That's interesting. 5 guys holding one single championship. That's never been done before in a company. So that's
Yeah,
amazing.
or at least not a televised company. And
No.
once it has been done, you'll know they heard it here and they stole it from us. So you're welcome.
Right. An exclusive. Yeah. I mean, it's unheard of before. Like, how would that work? Like, you just have somebody, hold the title for somebody else. Like, would
we
you
all took a
freebird it?
picture with the title, and we would go into the ring, and one guy would just we would draw straws or rock paper scissors and decide who's going to go in and defend it, and then the rest would go and secure the investment. And so I mean, it's definitely a heel group, and it was not long lived. That company unfortunately shut down very shortly after that.
Oh, man.
Unrelated, but it was fun. And I would say that the creative side of professional wrestling, the storylines, creating gimmicks and matches and storylines, that's really what appeals to me the most about professional wrestling, because it's not just going in there and laying in knuckles, right? There's creativity to it, and I love that process. So I got into it with the idea that I was going to run through the jobs and learn the business inside and out, so that I could earn my right to start telling those stories and innovate and create matches and so forth.
Well, what you're doing is you're moving up the ladder in a lot of ways, because you're not only a wrestler, but if you have ideas for things that you want to do, you're going out there and you want to pitch these things, and bam, you've got a job now where you're able to do all that. So that's so cool that you still have that opportunity to go out there and do that. Because very few people can say that they're able to do that, but you're one of them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I feel like earning the right is important. I think I think it's one thing to say like, eh, and I learned this I think partly because I am creative, and I did in my youth I thought, well, great, well, I have an idea for this or that, and you would send it out, and then you'd realize, well, you gotta earn your spot, right? You got to earn your right to be able to give those ideas, regardless of what industry you're in. And for me, it was pro wrestling. So now I'm in a position where, I was looking at the opportunity of getting back in the ring, or looking in the opportunity to do kind of a side business, if you will, an investment, and Overdriver's what went out, and so now I'm getting to work with great promotions all over the country, and that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing that continue to grow. But professional wrestling is a unique business, and you have to pay your dues, you have to earn your rights.
It definitely is. Now, you started Overdriver. It's just a unique concept as we've been talking about this. You're
Sure.
working with different companies. What kind of got you thinking about wanting to start this? Because this has almost never been done before.
Yeah, so I think it's a classic entrepreneur story, right? So you see a problem and you start thinking, well, how do we fix the problem? How do we start addressing it? And for me, professional wrestling posed, and I guess you could even say independent professional wrestling to an extent, posed several challenges that I thought needed addressing. And over the course of my career, as I continue to experience these positives as well as negatives, I started, formulating ideas and how we would be able to go about making this kind of an adjustment. And um, I would say about 2 years ago now, we were getting ready to have my daughter, and my wife and I were talking about investing. And I pitched this idea that I've been thinking about for a while. And, just so happens she's not only like my wife, but she's like my best friend and my soulmate. And she's a perfect partner because once I started giving her those ideas, she started like building on them and filling in the holes that I didn't think of. And then this, really started to form into what it is becoming, which was the idea of doing an app instead of a website. And by doing this app, we'd be able to apply technologies that work for other businesses, that will help us to better identify this business. I'm shocked that professional wrestling is as big as it is and as old as it is and has not been appropriately databased. Um, and I thought, well, that's one thing. And then two, we need ratings and reviews to be able to identify people that need highlighting and promotions that need highlighting, and to help to elevate them, to help
Give
elevate the
them a
whole
boost.
business. But then also to give poor morally guided individuals in either a booker's position or a promoter or a wrestler's position the opportunity to hang themselves publicly, so that the positive can grow and the negative can start pushing itself out of the business. And I felt like a platform really needed to be developed to do that. And we started doing surveys, and the surveys show that 93% of the promoters that have taken our surveys have been in some way or another screwed over by talent. And then 89% of the talent have in some way been screwed over by a promoter. And if there was some database to say 2 stars, 3 stars, 5 stars, maybe you'd have an idea going into it, what's going to happen. Maybe if we had secured transactions, then you would know that you're going to get paid. And maybe if we had the ability to pay commission for tickets that you're selling, maybe we'll have more than 50 people show up to this show. Maybe we'll have more than 150 at this show. Maybe we'll have a real surgence on the independent level that's similar to what corporate America offers, which is structure. And I think that's what we can really do with Overdrivers, make it more efficient, transparent, and profitable.
That's a very unique concept that you've developed. Now, is this going to be only for independent promotions, or does this apply to all wrestling promotions across the world?
Yeah, so the answer would be B, right? So it's designed to be the entire industry, right? If WWE wanted to have a free profile on it, not because they need it, but that they wanted to be able to explore all the talent that's all grouped in one area, then they could absolutely sign up for free, have a profile, and start using the database. If you're starting a promotion and you need to figure out where you're going to find talent, referees, photographers, videographers, We want that all in one spot. And we have other tools that we'll be working on as the app launches and we start growing. We'll start putting that profit back into more tools so that every resource that can possibly be available to a professional wrestler, a wrestling fan, or a wrestling promoter will be in one place.
It's like a social media company or social media network exclusively for
Exclusive to
professional
the industry.
wrestlers. That's
Yes, sir.
that's so cool that you're doing that. Why don't we?
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome. So on that note, let's kind of switch gears now. Talk about some of the charity work that you have done in the business and outside of the business. What are some of the organizations that you've partnered up with?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different situations with professional wrestling. Primarily speaking, the majority of the charities that I've been involved with were in tribute to somebody who had lost. A mentor of mine, BK Valor, had passed away because of COVID, and there was a tribute to him. There was a tribute show to some friends and family of promoters that had lost. And we donated our services to the show in order to help support these independent charities that help with fundraising of a very personal loss. Outside of the professional wrestling, a lot of my work has been in retail and commission sales. St. Jude's is one of the bigger charities that we've done a lot of work for and helping to build a significant amount of financing to help that particular charity. And then the Ronald McDonald's charity house is another one that we've worked with, to build a significant amount of money for as well.
Oh, that's so outstanding that you've been able to do that. Was there a particular moment or memory you have of just seeing the sheer joy of somebody smiling or somebody that was touched by the fact that you helped them or came to them in a time of need?
Yeah, so I would love to give you a feel good moment there, but the unfortunate side of working for large corporate America sales kind of environment is that your contributions, you don't generally get to see what they yield. That goes down generally to upper management, upper corporate, and so you'll get these videos that are sent back, but to get the one-on-one interaction is not something that I could say that we really had the pleasure of being able to experience, or at least many of my coworkers in the several cases that we worked for several of these charities, just never had that opportunity. We knew we were doing good, and so it felt good to do that. But it was just a kind of another day in the grind, just with a different goal in mind, if that makes sense.
I see. Yeah, definitely. Good to give back and help out. And just wanted to get your thoughts on being passionate about helping out. What makes you feel passionate about doing something good for others?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that really comes down to, I guess, two things. One is just human nature. I think a lot of us feel that way, but my faith, it, it's it guides us to give back, right? That's part of what we're supposed to do. The act of faith, taking care of the homeless, the widowed, the orphaned, taking care of the sick. Those who have are called to take care of those who don't. The whole idea of tithe is really to be giving to an organization that you trust, to be giving back to those communities. And so that I think is a duty that we have, if we say that we have any kind of faith towards humanity.
It definitely seems like, you know, important to give back and help out because, they've done it for you. You're doing it for them. So it's about kind of returning the favor.
Right. Well, and I think in some cases, I think it really comes down again, for me, it's a faith thing. There are a lot of cases where no, not necessarily have I had somebody help me out in that way. But I know that my father has. I know that God has taken care of me. I've seen his fingerprints on my life. I've seen where Christ has healed my life and has given to me. And the only way that I can really give back to him is to take care of his other kids, right? And so that's kind of where I think sometimes the duty comes in. I think some of us are blessed enough that we don't always get put in the position where we are giving back because somebody had given to us. I think sometimes we're just in a position to give back because we know we're blessed. And the only way to keep that blessing going is to be a funnel or a pipe, and not to be a dam, not to collect it, but to let it flow through.
Well, that's a very good way of putting it. You want to give back because it's good for you in your heart that you're doing something right for
Right.
somebody
Yeah,
else.
absolutely.
Well, this has been wonderful getting the chance to talk with you, Bill, about your career and the stuff that you're doing with the social media marketing and just the acts of kindness that you're doing. Uh, just wonderful, really is.
Well, I
Uh,
appreciate that, Stanley. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Where can people find you on social media and anything you want to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one thing that I would say is if you're a fan of professional wrestling, if you're a professional wrestler or a talent of any kind, from referees to photographers to ring crew, if you want exposure to more bookings, go to overdriver.org and sign up to our launch list. Become part of the launch of Overdriver Pro in 2024. We currently have over 73 promotions in 24 states. We have a presence in 48% of the country. We intend by the time to launch to be over 100 promotions that we will be able to help connect you to give you that increased exposure. And if you're a promoter, then that gives you a whole talent pool that you'll be able to sign up for free to be able to search. And if you're a wrestling fan, then you can find wrestlers and promotions on this app and sign up for free. So if you have any interest in professional wrestling at all, or any interest in helping us with movement, go to overdriver.org, sign up to the launch list, and you can find us on Overdriver LLC on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Well, I'll be sure to check that out. Thank you again, Bill. It means a lot to me and my listeners and viewers watching this on YouTube. You're more than welcome to come back.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Stanley. You've been a great host, and it's an honor to be here in Wrestling with Heart.
All righty. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.